Well, Dane, thank you for being part of my project. This is actually the first interview. Well, I take that back. I did have one with my high school teacher where she wanted to do it via text, and then my wife and I sort of recreated it. But other than that, this is like the first video or the first interview where I didn't have the video turned on. And you were just explaining to me kind of some of the restrictions about that and that we need to work in. I just wonder if you wouldn't mind maybe saying that again.
Yeah, sure. I am Dane Drefke. I am the lead mechanical engineer for launch operations of United Launch Alliance, LLC. We launched the Delta IV, Atlas, and soon to be the Vulcan rockets for the US Air Force, for NASA, the Department of Defense. And because I am at work, since this was the time that would work for you, I'm an hour ahead of you. Again, because I am at work and I am on a military installation, I'm not allowed to tie you in through video, but we can do this over the phone.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you so much for being a part of the project. I I guess when did you find out that we're planning to go back to the moon in 2024?
Oh, I've been hearing about it for quite some time because actually before I answer that question and before I go any further, there is one other thing I have to tell you. I did identify myself as being an employee of ULA, but they require me to tell you that everything that I'm telling you is my opinion and it does not necessarily reflect the company's opinion. So just so you know, this is me you're talking to, not the company. Saying that, my boss, the guy who runs the company, had named Tory Bruno. He's actually on the U.S. Space Council with the vice president, and he has been a big proponent for a long time of the concept of lunar development, of cislunar space economy, of the space between here and the moon, and actually, the U.S. taking the next step towards the moon instead of making the huge leap trying to get to Mars right away. So, he has been, I don't want to say instrumental, but he's been very much involved in evolving the policy with the Space Council that would take us to the moon. So I've been hearing about it for quite some time. And to be honest, my opinion, my reaction, I'm sorry, I'm tripping over my own tongue here. My reaction is it's about darn time. Because I grew up a child of Apollo. I was born, in between Apollo 11 and Apollo 12, and I was just fascinated by it as a young kid. And the Saturn V rocket to me was the epitome of human creation, and I was just fascinated by the Apollo program and the space program, and I was hoping we would have gotten back there by now before it was 50 years later. But here we are, and I'm very excited for it.
Yeah, I Tory Bruno is one of the most inspiring uh, leaders, and I would say that the kind of the more traditional space company, um, organizations. I mean, he's like the ULA equivalent. I mean, he has a similar, I guess, enthusiasm for space exploration that you see from a lot of these billionaires who have funded their own space companies, which is so encouraging to see. Um, uh,
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things that Tory Bruno said to us, the ULA recently underwent a pretty big transformation. We have become incredibly efficient and have scaled down a lot of what we used to be. It was necessary because of the changing marketplace, but we went through some pretty tough times during that process when there were some needed cutbacks. And at the low point of that, he said to us, he says, "This is not a job. This is a calling." And everyone kind of looked at him like, "What in the heck?" And he actually meant it. And when you listen to him describe why he said that, then it's absolutely true. Why do we get out of bed every morning, 2 hours before dawn to come in here and, build these rockets that sometimes, take 65, 70 hours a week. And when we launch them, it's in the middle of the night. It's because of the critical importance that, this industry plays to the future of not only the United States, but, mankind in general. All of the GPS satellites up until very recently were flown on our rockets. And so anytime you pick up your phone or you take money out of an ATM or you get directions to the movie theater, it's because of the GPS satellites that we put into space. And when he described it in real terms of how it affects everyday lives, it's like, he's right. And his enthusiasm is just infectious. He's a tremendous leader.
Right. And in terms of the importance that he and ULA's been kind of talking about with regards to cislunar space, I mean, a few years ago, ULA published a document called Cislunar 1000, which kind of outlined sort of a projection of how, um, the sequence of events that would lead to development of cislunar space over the next few decades. I, I was wondering um, how what kind of reaction you've seen from that document.
Um, it's not been received to the degree that I think it should have, honestly, because everyone is focused on the big red prize, which is Mars, and everyone thinks, oh, the next step is we got to go to Mars, got to go to Mars. I mean, even Dr. Buzz Aldrin wears this shirt that says "Occupy Mars," and I have the utmost respect for him as well, but it's to me, that document is the natural evolution. It's the next stepping stone. It's what we need to do. And when you look at the economics and the business case and the development case that document represents, I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. But it was not met with the enthusiasm that I think something a little more splashy would have been. And that's just because the public um, doesn't necessarily think in those terms. They think in terms of the next big accomplishment, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's just the natural way that people think.
Yeah, I mean that's a very good point. People are looking for sort of like the trophy or the big photo op as opposed to industrialization and building infrastructure and really advancing capabilities. Um, and I was just talking to Marcia from Space Policy Online yesterday, and we were talking about sort of, the challenges of doing things like space-based solar power. The amount of material you would have to launch from Earth, but then, alternatives of potentially mining that material and producing it on the moon also is prohibitive because the amount of material we need to get to the moon to actually do that is a lot. But if we already had infrastructure in place, then the incremental costs would be much more acceptable. And I guess, do you, right now, our space-based infrastructure is on the ground and in Earth orbit. Do you see realistically us having, uh, kind of infrastructure that is really supporting development that's further out, and what kind of timeframes um, are sort of your personal thoughts in terms of how that might unfold?
Yes, absolutely. And the reason all of our infrastructure is still on the ground and still in low Earth orbit is because escaping from Earth's gravity well is the most expensive part of the entire journey. And it's the hardest part of the entire journey. Getting through the lower Earth atmosphere takes a tremendous amount of energy. That's why the first stage of rockets are so big. And then escaping Earth's gravity well is, also a very, very energy intensive. The amount of energy it takes to get out of, low Earth orbit into lunar orbit, or from a different series of orbits that are surrounding high Earth out to lunar orbit, is a fraction in comparison. So it's almost like we're climbing, the first part of the wall, and once you get up and out of, Earth's gravity well, then that is a lot easier to deal with and a lot less expensive. It doesn't take near as much fuel. It doesn't take near as much energy. So once we get to the point where we have, the lunar gateway, the base that's in, a stable orbit between here and the moon, or we have, the ability to get to those orbits from low Earth orbit by, not originating from ground level, not originating from Kennedy Space Center and going straight there, but from actually leaving from low Earth orbit, that makes it infinitely easier. So we just have to get through that big first step. And once we're through that big first step and we have, you know, a greater capability and a greater, base of operations, if you will, in an area that doesn't require so much expense and energy to get out of, then that will open the door to a whole range of new possibilities. As far as a time frame is concerned, I would love to see it in the next 10 to 15 years. And I think that really is realistic at the rate that we're going now, not only with private development and private companies like mine, but also the direction that NASA has taken at the behest of the Space Council. I really do think that's achievable, and it's very, very exciting.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I feel like the 2020s are going to be to space exploration what the 1990s were to the internet and the computer. In 1990, you would have an easier time explaining people orbital mechanics than email. But by 2000, pretty much everybody had email, and nobody had a website other than perhaps some really rudimentary internal precursors to the web for research in
Yeah,
1990. But by
I
2000,
remember the
yeah.
90s well, and honestly, I missed the 90s. It was a much simpler world then. But anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to distract you.
No, no, I completely understand. And the internet used to be like kind of a magical place, at least in the early 90s, like where like you didn't have the marketing and the uh, the constant barrage of sort of information meant to drive you one way or another. But it seemed like an exclusive club in the early 1990s, but it's not
Yes.
much anymore. Um, but it feels to me like by 2030, we will forget kind of our limitations that we have today. That with all the kind of like investment in energy, both private, the U.S. government, and international governments, I mean, it really feels like um, we're we're developing a capability that will be transformative over the next decade, and um, you know, the number of people that fly to space in the next decade will probably be several multiples of all the people that have ever flown to space, and the things that we'll do every day in space by 2030 will be things that we currently think are difficult or are impossible. I mean, that's kind of like my projection. And I was wondering, did you think that was over optimistic, or do you do you see reasons to believe that that might be possible?
No, there absolutely are reasons to believe that's possible, and here's why I think that way. And it also ties in with, a lot of those documents that we discussed earlier with the cislunar economy and things of that nature. When the business case is there, it will happen. If you look at the original, or I shouldn't say the original, but if you look at the historical analog of what happened with, exploration of the New World, the Portuguese were first, and they were out, and they basically discovered half of North America and sailed around, and then Columbus made his expedition. But then for 100+ years, not much else happened. It wasn't until there was an economic reason for people to make that perilous journey all the way across the wild Atlantic Ocean and deal with the dangers of that, that it became commonplace. And we're in the same situation now with space travel. That's kind of a simplified example, but with right now, space travel is the realm of governments that have the funding necessary based upon the critical need for exploration and defense infrastructure and things of that nature. And it is the realm of the billionaires who have the money to burn, because I guarantee you they're not making much money right now with the launches that they're funding and the companies that they're funding. I have the utmost respect for Jeff Bezos and Blue Origin and the company that he is creating and the vision that he has for it. But it only exists because he's the richest man in the world, and he pulls. And this is completely my opinion. So, but he pulls some money out of his holdings that he can afford to fund his company. It's a great company. I actually interviewed for him a long time ago. I have friends that work there, and he has a great vision. That vision wouldn't be possible without his funding, but that vision will be possible when the business case is there, and when there's economic incentive and when there's financial incentive that will essentially pay the bills when you get there. And that is the case when you look at the economic possibilities that are really out there waiting for us in cislunar space, in the at the moon, at the near Earth asteroids, and things that could be mined that are potentially in the trillions of dollars in value. That's where the impetus comes for, well, we got to get there first, because if you're the first one on the asteroid mining it and you discover it's made of solid silver, it's going to change. It's going to change the whole paradigm, and then people are going to be more willing to invest in that venture to get out there. And I'm being a little simplified. There's obviously much more useful and economic materials out there than an asteroid made out of silver. That was just being silly.
Right, right. But it's a good point. I think one that is kind of challenging to the world economy and to the way that we think of precious metals, and to kind of like the local, the impact. I mean, using gold to store value is probably the worst use of gold ever thought of. I mean, it has unique
True.
physical properties that other elements don't have, and because it's valuable, the thought of using it for that, like a coating and as a conductor and um, what have you, is just something that's really used in very rare applications. And the same thing is true of like platinum uh,
and palladium and silver and other metals. You're absolutely right. If they weren't so beautiful and shiny to look at, then they wouldn't have that ridiculous value associated to them, and we could use them for their their properties and their it would be a lot more economical. You're correct.
but even if they remain shiny and pretty to look at, if they were extremely abundant, they still would be cheap.
Yeah, very true.
Um,
Very true. So the dynamic there could change. You're absolutely right. If we go out and we find an asteroid that's 40 miles wide that has just a tremendous store of these commodities that are rare and precious on Earth, that may change the entire world market, because now you find something that has 3 times the world's supply all in one location. Well, whoever has their hands on that is going to be the next richest person or corporation of the world, obviously. But if you flood the market, then the value is going to crash, of course. But now we're kind of getting into the weeds of economics.
yeah, yeah, no, that's very true. But I think part of the challenge is looking at the current prices, which are based upon the current mixture between supply and demand, and then looking at this huge change in supply, and then kind of extrapolating without taking that into account, the effect that it have on the prices is it's sort of something that we need to keep in mind. I mean, I think it's like
Mm-hmm.
semiconductors. I my brother-in-law used to work at TI, and they had kind of like a price point that they always try to aim for in terms of their chips to get it down below to so many cents or what have you, because they're like, I mean, first of all, they have competitors, but then the other thing is that they're really making their money based upon volume. And um, maybe there's you just have to kind of get people thinking along all the uses for these materials, and it won't be such a big drop.
Yeah,
Or
absolutely.
yeah. Um. So yeah, I worked as a real estate agent for a while, and it always puzzled me kind of how vandals would like destroy an AC unit just to get out a little bit of copper, and copper is not all that valuable, so compared to like gold or platinum. So it's kind
Oh,
of
I have a whole history of exactly the same situation that you have, and I won't go into it because it's a long and painful story. But I used to do real estate development not far from where you're at in the city of St. Louis, and I had multiple properties just absolutely destroyed by people trying to steal $50 worth of copper. And you're right, it was a horrible situation. But yeah.
yeah. And I guess even after the invasion of Iraq, so much of their electrical distribution uh, um, infrastructure, I think, got looted as well and dumped on the market. And
Hmm.
this is copper, so it's it,
Yeah, copper, it's like $3 a pound. It's like, come on. Yeah, but it's when you're desperate and the people that were doing this were desperate, then you do what you have to survive.
yeah, that's true. But you know, extracting that copper from those AC units looks like a lot of work. Uh, so just kind of ashamed to that we can't redirect that effort in more constructive ways.
I completely agree.
Um, Well, I've my original goal was kind of to interview non-space people. Between December and the middle of March, I pretty much interviewed people at the coffee shop and on the streets, at the airport, at the stores, and things like that, to kind of get a sense on how people relate to space and what they know about our return to the moon and that type of thing. And the vast majority of non-space people I've talked to have no idea that we're going back to the moon. In fact, a few of them have even, I mean, very few numbers, thought we shut the whole thing down in 2011. And then, some um, were wondering why NASA's keeping it a secret. And there have been a couple that are like, what, we're going to the moon? I thought that's where the astronauts went anyway. Um,
Oh my goodness.
I, I know. So there's, uh, uh, kind of, um, in terms of the vast majority of non-space people, the things that are happening in the aerospace industry really don't seem to be resonating with our reaching. And I was wondering if you had some thoughts on why that might be, or maybe I just have a bad sample and it's not the case. And then
No, I don't think you have a bad sample, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Please
no
finish your
trouble.
question.
Oh, I was just going to say, and also what might we do to change that?
Okay. So you mentioned 2011, and that there's no coincidence that the space shuttle stopped flying in 2011. And when that happened, people thought, well, NASA's not really doing anything anymore. They shut the whole thing down because they don't see it. They don't see, the fire in the sky and hear the rumble and see the shuttles, going into orbit. And they don't understand that, the space station's still up there, and we launch people and supplies up there all the time, and we still have missions that are going to other planets. I mean, my company just this summer launched another mission to Mars, which is extremely exciting. There's you know, a lot going on that people don't realize because they don't see it. It doesn't grab their attention. Right now, the headlines are dominated by the horrible turmoil that's going on in this country, and the pandemic and all the riots and the horrible things that are going on that I never thought I'd see again. And it's tragic that we are. But um, it's just not in the forefront. It's not, put in front of them on a daily basis by the mainstream media. And that's not necessarily because anyone's trying to hide anything. That certainly is not the case. There are only a few agencies that don't really want you to know what they're doing. Everybody else is like, hey, look what we're doing, like NASA. NASA has a tremendous public relations department. They have public outreach. They have youth organizations. They want people involved. They want people to know what NASA is doing for them, but they have a limited budget. NASA has been underfunded for its entire existence, in my opinion, and they focus their efforts on what gets them to their mission. And along the way, they do their best to engage the public and children and the next generation of engineers, that they need to get involved. So it's no failing of anyone. It's just the fact that it's not something that we can spend the resources on saying, hey, look what we're doing. So it doesn't surprise me, honestly, because, and I'll be perfectly honest, there's industries that I know nothing about because it's not put in front of me either. And I don't really have the time to go dig into it and find out. The pharmaceutical industry, I know very little to nothing about because it's the same situation. They spend their budget on, developing new medicines to improve humanity, but not about well, I shouldn't say that because there's commercials on TV every day. But my point being is that there are other industries that, you know, I have just a rudimentary knowledge of because I'm not involved with them every day. So honestly, that doesn't surprise me, but I do think that will change. I really do. And it is starting to change. And it's been because of the exciting things that you're seeing in the space industry now with the new entrants that are coming and the new capabilities that are being developed by everybody across the board, and it is getting more attention. There's a new enthusiasm that is emerging for space travel and for the aerospace industry. And I'm sure you see it on Twitter every day. I do too. I used to be a lot more heavily involved in it, but I've had to take a step back or two because of my work duties are just all consuming at the moment. But there is more enthusiasm, and I think as soon as you get a major milestone, like when NASA's SLS rocket flies, and that's coming very soon. And I cannot tell you how excited I am that that's coming very soon. As soon as that flies and it grabs the attention of the world, and it will, because it'll be the largest rocket that we've ever flown, then it will help redirect people's attention and they'll understand, hey, they have been working this whole time and they're working very hard this whole time to get to this goal. And then maybe they'll listen a little more to the narrative that says, this is why we're doing this. We're going to the moon. We're building our capabilities to get us to other planets. So it's just a matter of, you've got to have the attention grabbing visual in order to get people's attention.
That's a very good point. I think if you ask people, hey, do you know about us launching American astronauts from American soil and American rockets? They'd probably say, yeah, that happened in June. But you ask them, do you know about the first man, first woman landing on the moon? It's like, no. But as you pointed out, I think once you actually see those milestones being met, the enthusiasm will be there. Uh,
Yes.
Another way to get people involved is if there is an opportunity for them personally to go to space, um, that seems to really excite people that otherwise may not take an interest. And I was wondering if you heard of this reality kind of TV show program that's in the work called Space Heroes, which plans to do a worldwide contest to find somebody to send to the International Space Station for 10 days.
No, I haven't heard about that. Is that relatively new?
It is, and they're still in the formative stages. It looks legit. Axiom Aerospace, which I think is a fairly legit company, it's announced that they're going to be the ones that take care of arranging the transportation. And then I know some people at University of Texas in Austin who are associated with the program. So I think if they could get it structured right and get the sponsors, they could make it happen. And I think it might help to create an enthusiasm that's kind of in addition and distinct to all the other activities that are going on. I was wondering what your thoughts were.
Yeah, I think that would definitely be, something that would get people excited. Absolutely. And there are other companies that are making, the early stages of space travel more accessible. Blue Origin that I mentioned earlier has a program where they're trying to get, people into not necessarily Earth orbit, but on a suborbital flight that you could take on their New Shepard rocket, I think is what they were developing. And then you've got Virgin Galactic with Richard Branson, and he's developing Spaceship 1 and 2, where people can take a ride into suborbital flight and see the limb of the Earth, and that's exciting. But this is the first I've heard of this competition that you'd mentioned with this other company. That would certainly tend to get people very excited. I'm not quite sure how they would fund that or how that would happen. And at the same time, I hope people understand that space travel is not like getting on a jet. It's not routine. It can be very dangerous. And I've been working with my company for quite some time. We're developing the capability to launch the CST-100 Starliner capsule for our customer Boeing. And we had our test flight last year, and we're have another test flight coming up. They're a little behind schedule, but that's neither here nor there, and I can't really comment on what they're doing. But I've been heavily involved in the process of training and safety procedures, and the contingencies that can come up that are associated with space flight. And it's a lot more difficult than people think. Let's put it that way. And there's a lot more involved, and so it's a capability that I think as time is coming, but it's not as simple as hopping on a jetliner and putting on your lap belt and away you go.
I imagine a lot of the reality TV show programming for this will be the astronaut selection and training pieces,
Yes.
which as they go through what's required to actually survive the trip and the risk, I don't think it's going to be necessary to vote people off the island. You might have the
No. Very true. Very true. They may wash out on their own.
So there is a connection between this program that I'm working on, this Countdown to the Moon, and ULA. It's a very tenuous connection. It's a customer of a customer type situation. But I'm planning to take all the videos or interviews that I do up into the middle of November, put on a micro SD card, and I've already bought a DHL moon box to send on Astrobotics Peregrine
Oh
lander.
yes, nice, nice. Yeah,
Uh,
we're going to launch that on our Vulcan rocket. That's a great idea.
yeah, in fact, it'd be the inaugural flight of the Vulcan, I think.
Yes, it will.
and and it uses Blue Origin's BE4 engines too, so we got that tied
That's
in.
correct. That's correct. Sure does.
Um, well, I know we're a little bit past the time. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to?
I just wanted to say that what I don't think is commonly, well, no, that's not the right way to say it. I'll just put it this way. I think what we're seeing now is definitely its time has come. When I originally got involved in aerospace, and I mentioned when I was a kid, I watched the moon landings, and I thought for sure we would be much farther along than we are now. I thought for sure, when I grew up and got a job in this industry, that I would be working on the next set of rovers that would be driving around the moon, or and here we are now 50 years later, when we've lost the majority of the Apollo astronauts who have walked on the moon. They've since passed. um, we've not gone back, and that to me has been a huge disappointment. So its time has definitely come. I understand why, we haven't been back, and because, our national priorities were focused on other things, and the NASA's budget was spent on the space shuttle, which was a tremendous program. I know there are a lot of shuttle haters out there. I'm not one of them. I loved the space shuttle, but it was such a complicated machine that it took all of NASA's energy to make it work. And then we assembled the space station, which is a tremendous achievement, but people don't necessarily see it as such. But the advances that have come out of developing the space station, and the science that's being done on it now, have far-reaching benefits that people don't see, and some of us don't even understand. But that natural evolution of getting us out of low Earth orbit again, its time has definitely come. And that's what the new generation of spacecraft is going to allow. The Orion capsule and the SLS rockets, and the things that are being developed. Those will get us out of low Earth orbit and get us that next generational capability to create that cislunar economy, to get us to the moon bases, and the gateway station that's being proposed, and it's just, that was a capability the shuttle never had, because it couldn't leave low Earth orbit. It didn't have enough fuel. It wasn't designed to do that. It was designed to go up to low Earth orbit and back safely and fly like an airplane. So had we developed the capabilities of Apollo along with the shuttle, then that evolution would have continued, and we would have been much farther along than we are now. But that, of course, would have required a doubling of NASA's budget. So it's just the economic realities of it. I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm, like I said earlier, it's about darn time, and I'm really excited for it. And I wish it had happened earlier in my career so I could have been more involved. But I'm here now, wide-eyed and ready to go. In fact, the second stage of the first SLS rocket is downstairs from the building that I'm in right now, and we are putting the final touches on it to take it over to NASA. And we're working, diligently with our customer and making sure that it's ready to go. So, I touch part of the rocket on a regular basis, and I look at it and I get that feeling of, wow, here it is. It's actually happening, and I'm tremendously excited about it. I share your enthusiasm, and the enthusiasm of many other people that, the next decade or two is going to be transformational.
Well, thank you so much, Dane, for your time, and I hope you have a very productive day.
Thank you, Nathan. You're very welcome. And you have a fascinating project. Thank you for including me in it. And I look forward to hearing more of the interviews that you do.
Thank you, and best of luck.
Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.